I heard them. Not words at first, just laughter. Muffled, low, but unmistakably real. At that hour, the world outside my door was asleep. But inside that room, the world I built was collapsing in slow motion.
I remember standing there, unfrozen on the doorknob, listening.
My name drifted through the air, wrapped in a tone I had never heard before.
Not affection.
Not concern.
Something sharpé. Something cruel.
I told myself I must be wrong. That there had to be another reason for the laughter. But then I heard it again.
Louder this time.
And underneath it, her voice. They were talking about me. Not with anger. Not with regret. But with amusement. The kind of laughter that feels private.
The kind you share only when you know you've gotten away with something. I stepped closer.
The door gave way just enough for a line of light to fall across the floor. And through that narrow gap, I saw them, the two people I trusted most in the world.
Sitting close.
Faces glowing in the blue light of a phone. My messages. My words. On the screen between them.
Are you okay? I miss you. Please, just tell me what is wrong.
They read them one by one, and laughed. It was quiet laughter, soft and unhurried, like music played for no one but themselves. My chest tightened until I couldn't breathe. My heart kept insisting it had to be a misunderstanding. But my eyes knew better. In that moment, something inside me fractured. Not loudly, not like glass, but in silence, like the quiet snap of a thread that's been pulled too tight for too long. I stood there long enough to memorize the sound of their joy. Because I knew it would haunt me long after I walked away. People always talk about betrayal like it's an explosion. But it isn't.
It's a whisper behind a closed door.
It's the echo of laughter you were never meant to hear. That night, I didn't just lose them. I lost the version of myself that believed I was safe. That was the moment everything began to end. I didn't open the door. I wanted to. God, my hand shook on the knob like it had its own pulse, counting down to a version of my life I couldn't take back. But I didn't do it. I stood there, half hidden in the shadow of the hallway, breathing like a runner at the end of a race she didn't train for, listening to their laughter spill through that thin slice of light.
It sounded softly with my name in it.
There are moments in life when the world slows down, but not to save you. It slows so you can watch everything carefully as it breaks. The line of light across the floor cut the scene into two worlds, theirs warm and private, mine cold and merciless. I could make out the outlines of their shoulders, the shape of his hands when he gestured, the way she tilted her head toward him as if the gravity in the room had moved and set up house between them. They were reading my words. A small universe lived inside those messages, weeks and months of small kindnesses, check-ins, reminders, all the little stitches I used to hold us together while I told myself I wasn't mending. They scrolled and paused and scrolled again. Sometimes they leaned in. Sometimes they laughed without sound, shoulders bouncing, the kind of laughter that protects itself from being overheard. I stayed because leaving meant acceptance. Leaving meant the truth would harden into a fact I couldn't sand down with hope. So I stood there, memorizing the angles. The room smelled faintly of oranges from the candle on the dresser, my candle. The blue glow of the phone made their faces look clean, younger somehow, like innocence can be faked if you light it right. A glass on the table had water beads running down its sides. I counted the beads to keep from crying. 1, 2, 3. I lost track at 12 when he said my name again, softer this time, and she bit back a laugh like it tasted too sweet not to swallow. When it ended, because every scene ends, even the ones that feel infinite, they switched to another topic, something about a deadline, the kind of conversation you can have only after you've finished harming someone and returned to your regularly scheduled programming. I stepped back from the door as quietly as I could, even though no one was listening for me. My body felt heavy in places I didn't know could carry weight, wrists, stomach, tongue. I walked down the hall, each step careful, as if the floor could hear and would tell. In the mirror near the elevator I saw a stranger. Her lipstick had faded into an outline, her eyes looked too bright, like glass when it catches the wrong light. She lifted her hand and pressed the back of her fingers to her mouth and smiled, an ugly, apologetic thing. I didn't know why I smiled. Maybe I thought my face would break if it only held one expression. The elevator took years to arrive. The hallway hummed. Somewhere a TV murmured a laugh track, the mechanical kind that tells you when to feel included. I pressed the button twice even though once is enough. It made me feel like I could hurry time. When the doors opened, I stepped inside and finally breathed. The doors closed on their laughter. But it didn't mute. It just moved. It settled in my chest, in the small spaces behind thoughts where sound echoes longest. Outside, the night air tasted like rain that hadn't decided to fall yet. I walked without choosing a direction, the city touching me lightly with streetlights and traffic and the occasional stranger's shoulder. Inside a bakery, a girl in an apron wiped down a table, drawing perfect circles with her cloth. A man smoked under a flickering sign, the ember of his cigarette blinking like a tiny lighthouse. I thought about stopping. About telling a stranger everything so I could be someone else's story instead of mine. I kept walking. By the time I reached home, the space between my shoulder blades had grown tight, like wings that never learned to open. My apartment smelled like last night's tea and the paper lilies I'd made as a joke one Sunday afternoon because the florist was closed. I set my phone on the counter. I washed my hands and watched the water cloud, as if it were holding its own breath. I didn't look at my phone. I didn't want proof that they were fine. I didn't want proof that they had turned off the light and slept the sleep of people whose guilt is a costume they wear in daylight. I took off my earrings, the ones he gave me for my birthday.
Pearl, the gentle lie of the sea.
I placed them on the dish by the sink and tried to feel something specific, anger, hatred, indignation, but all I felt was a throb of disbelief playing under the surface like a bass line I couldn't isolate. I made tea. Not because I wanted it, but because it made the apartment sound domestic. Kettle, cup, a small clink of ceramic as if life were obedient and would come when called. I sat at the table and opened my notebook. I wrote the date at the top of the page. For a long time I stared at the line after it, the way blank space holds its breath before a confession. I wrote one sentence. Tonight I learned the shape of their laughter.
He closed the notebook.
That was enough truth for one night. Sleep didn't come.
Itoverd, indécisive, perché on the edge of the bed like a cat who note sur I trust you anymore.
I lay there and watched the ceiling turn from black to charcoal to blue, the slow burn of night giving way to morning. My mind kept making lists I didn't ask for, every time he cancelled, every excuse she borrowed, the tiny gestures that had once felt like warmth and now felt like careful choreography. I retraced conversations word by word, as if I could find the moment a syllable betrayed me and warn myself to run.
When the light grew honest, he got up.
The morning looked normal. Cars. Buses. People with coffee.
A woman in red ale, walking like she trusted the ground.
I made toast I didn't eat. I put on clothes that knew how to behave.
In the mirror, he pressed conseiller beneath my eyes.
It did its job, layering order over exhaustion.
He practiced a face.
Not a smile, just a neutral landscape where no storms were allowed to be seen forming. On the way out, I paused at the door. The bowl on the console held a tangle of keys, the ones that promised access and belonging, home, car, office, his. My fingers found his key by muscle memory. I lifted it. It was heavier than I remembered. Metal has a way of reminding you it's real. I turned it over, running my thumb along the teeth, thinking about how a person can carry the key to a place they are no longer welcome and not know until it's time to open the door.
He left it in the bowl.
I wasn't ready to decide anything that final. Not yet. Not on the first day of the life after. Outside, the air had warmed. Someone somewhere was making pancakes, the smell drifted down the block and into me, a small kindness from a stranger's breakfast. I walked to the train and let the city carry me, the car a quiet container full of other people's mornings. The woman across from me scrolled through photos of a toddler in a dinosaur onesie. The man beside me slept with his mouth slightly open, dreaming something that softened his face. I wanted to love everyone on that train. I wanted to pour my ache into 1,000 tiny mercies and spend it until there was nothing left. When I reached the office, the hallway smelled like fresh paint. Someone had fixed the scuff near the elevator we all ignored for months. I liked that, proof that something could be repaired without a witness. At my desk, I opened my laptop. The screen lit up with the usual, calendars, reminders, a polite storm of tasks. A message from him waited in the corner, gray bubble. I read it before I could decide not to.
Did you make it home?
Simple. Practiced concern. One of the lines that keeps a bridge standing even as the river eats away at the supports. I typed, yes. His reply arrived immediately, as if he had been watching the typing dots the way people watch skies for rain.
Good. Long day. See you later.
I placed my hands flat on the desk and counted to 10. Then I turned the monitor brightness down until the world looked farther away. At 10:30, she appeared in the doorway. She knocked, not on the doorframe, but on the air twice, a tiny courtesy that announced she understood offices as stages. She wore the scent we chose together one summer, jasmine with something like thunder underneath. She smiled like nothing in the world had weight. "Coffee?" she asked, as if the word had never been used to apologize for anything. "I already had some," I said. She walked in anyway, perched on the corner of my desk, crossed her legs at the ankle. Her dress was the color of leaves when they've decided to survive winter. She looked expensive and effortless, the trick we both learned but only one of us perfected. "How are you?" she asked. "Fine," I said. She watched my face with the careful attention of someone searching for a hairline crack.
You look tired.
The day went on, but I didn't. Outside, people bought coffee, cursed at traffic, answered phones. Inside, I was still standing in that hallway, hearing laughter that no longer belonged to the world but to some private hell looping in my chest. Betrayal doesn't end with discovery. It lingers, quiet, civilized, dressing itself as routine. You keep moving because stillness feels like confession. That night, I opened the windows just to prove air still existed. The street below glimmered with wet light, headlights trembling over puddles like nervous apologies.
Every sound, quart d'heure, shoot, Lothaire, felt too close.
The world sounded like them. I sat on the edge of the bed and thought about how trust dies, not in an explosion, but in paperwork, one signature at a time, until the document of your belief is void. And still, I kept waiting for a message that wouldn't come. Some small line of text that could rewrite what I'd seen. But the screen stayed blank, bright, cruel. At 2 a.m., my phone lit up, not with him, not with her, but with a useless notification about weather. "Rain tomorrow," it said. As if the sky hadn't already broken. By morning, the air had that washed-out quality after storms. I made breakfast I didn't eat and went to work because survival, at first, is mimicry.
You imitate the living until you remember.
At the office, his chair was there. Her perfume, faint but present, had already arrived before either of them. I told myself I wouldn't look. I looked anyway. He came in with that same tired smile, practiced enough to seem kind. The smile that once steadied me now looked like a signature forged under pressure. "Morning," he said, casual. "Morning," I replied, quieter. Her heels clicked down the hall a few minutes later. She laughed, not the same laugh, not that laugh, but the body remembers. My chest tightened, a muscle conditioned by sound. She glanced at me when she passed, her eyes glossy, unreadable. She said my name like it was an old song she barely remembered. I nodded, mechanical. I watched them orbit each other, subtle, professional, innocent in the way only guilty people can manage. It's astonishing how normal betrayal looks under fluorescent light. I told myself not to keep count, but the mind keeps its own score. Every text he didn't send. Every break they took at the same time. Every silence that used to be comfort and now felt like choreography. The hardest part wasn't losing them. It was realizing how long ago I already had. I had been living in the echo of something that had ended months before I caught up. That evening, I stayed late, pretending work could drown thought. The office emptied slowly, chairs pushed in, lights dimmed. He was still there in the conference room, talking softly into his phone. I didn't need to hear the words.
Ik knew the rhythm.
Affection has a shape even when muted by glass. When he noticed me looking, he waved, casual, harmless, and mouthed 1 minute. I nodded. I packed my things and left before the minute was over. It was the smallest act of rebellion I could afford. Outside, the air was heavy again.
Thunder in the distance.
I wanted it to rain hard enough to erase everything. Instead, it just misted, the kind of drizzle that pretends to cleanse but only clings. When I got home, the city's pulse stayed under my skin. I poured wine I didn't taste, turned on music I didn't hear, and stared at the door like it might open if I stared long enough. At midnight, I wrote a message I would never send. I know. Then I deleted it. Not because I forgave them, but because they didn't deserve the intimacy of my confirmation. Days folded into each other like bad pages in a book. I worked. I smiled. I answered questions with the right tone. No one noticed that my laughter had become choreography too. Inside, I was rewinding, every memory on replay, each frame examined for proof of when the betrayal began.
You start to question everything.
Was the kindness real? Was the concern rehearsed? Was I ever loved, or just convenient? It's a sickness, the way you keep dissecting a corpse, hoping it will tell you where it hid the heartbeat.
One night, curiosity won over pride.
I scrolled through old photos, our dinners, our trips, our inside jokes frozen in captions that now read like mockery. In every picture, one of them was already leaning slightly toward the other. The lens had seen it long before I did. The human heart is late to its own wake. Weeks passed. She stopped pretending to avoid me. He stopped pretending to ask about me. The script was rewritten. I was a guest appearance in my own story. The betrayal wasn't in one act. It was in the maintenance, the daily small cruelties disguised as indifference. You okay? She'd ask, voice soft, head tilted.
Fine, idée en serre, smiling like a reflex.
Good, she'd say too quickly.
You deserve to be happy.
Happy. That word sounded obscene in her mouth. He'd say, don't overthink it. As if betrayal were a math problem solvable by not showing your work. Then came the day I saw them together, really saw them.
No pretense left, no need for subtlety.
It was a Saturday afternoon. I was walking to the bookstore near the cafe, trying to remember how weekends felt before they became therapy. And there they were, across the street, hands almost but not quite touching, laughter unhidden. The world didn't stop. That was the cruelest part. Cars still moved.
The sun's poured gold over everything.
And they looked happy. For a moment, I felt small enough to disappear. Then something unexpected happened. I didn't cry. I didn't even freeze. I just watched. Watched the two people who had once shared my orbit move in perfect rhythm without me. And in that watching, I felt something inside me shift, not break, not heal but wake. I turned away first. That night, I didn't destroy anything. I didn't scream. I didn't drink myself into oblivion. I sat down at my table, opened my notebook, and wrote. They looked lighter without my love holding them up. Maybe that's what love is, the gravity that keeps liars grounded. I closed the book. The silence that followed was almost holy. The next morning, I began the slow work of subtraction. I deleted his number, then undeleted it, habit dies loud. I muted her messages, then unmuted them, just in case. I stared at their photos again, not to mourn but to memorize the faces of people I'd survived. Each action felt both too small and impossibly hard. But that's how recovery starts, not with forgiveness, but with exhaustion. I stopped explaining my sadness to people who hadn't earned it. I stopped rehearsing what I'd say if I confronted them. I stopped caring about whether they felt guilty. Betrayal had already given me its only gift, clarity. Then came the letter. Not handwritten, of course. We don't ruin our manicures for remorse anymore. An email.
Subject line blank.
From her.
I know things got complicated. I wish you understood that I never wanted to hurt you.
You mean a lot to me. I hope one day you'll see that we didn't plan any of this. It just happened. It just happened. The anthem of cowards. I didn't reply. But I printed it. Folded it. Slid it into the back of my journal under the date I'd first written. Tonight I learned the shape of their laughter. Because sometimes you keep evidence not for revenge, but for history. The message arrived from him a week later. Shorter. Colder. I'm sorry for how things turned out. You didn't deserve any of it. I hope you're okay. The same man who laughed at my messages asking if he was okay now hoped I was. I typed a reply I never sent. I'm not okay, but I'm free. Then I closed my laptop and opened the window. The evening smelled like dust and rain, the earth's way of washing its own mistakes.
I thought of every time I des choses en silence over confrontation, puis over truce.
And for the first time, I realized silence isn't peace. It's just postponed pain.
The night grew softer.
I slept. Not deeply, not yet, but enough to dream again. Sometimes I dreamed of them, the way laughter sounds before it learns to wound. Other times I dreamed of nothing at all, which was better. When I woke, I stopped checking my phone first.
He let the morning light find me before he found the world.
Slowly, life stopped being a response to their choices. Slowly, I began to belong to myself again. People think betrayal ends when you walk away. It doesn't. It lingers, in music you skip, in restaurants you avoid, in the way you flinch when someone says trust me. But there's another truth, betrayal also clears.
It cut away what was never real enough to survive the light.
The laughter I heard that night still echoes sometimes, but quieter now.
Not like a wound, like a warning.
I listen to it the way sailors listen to storms. With respect, not fear. Because betrayal, once named, loses its power. And I have learned to name it.
They lead to me together, he whispered.
They laughed about it. But in the end, the laughter stopped belonging to me. Now it's just noise behind a door I've already closed.
The betrayal wasn't the end of love.
It was the beginning of truth. Truth is a patient hunter.
It doesn't chase you.
It waits. It sits quietly in the corner of every room until the noise of denial fades, and then, when you finally run out of excuses, it stands. After the betrayal, silence followed me like weather. It clung to my clothes, filled my lungs. Even music couldn't drown it. Every song sounded like someone else's voice echoing through my ribs. I went through the days as if underwater. Each movement slow, distorted, heavy. People spoke to me and I answered from a distance, words bubbling to the surface without meaning. Night was worse.
Night remember everything.
At first I tried to hold myself together with rituals, tea at 10, lights off at midnight, alarms at 7. But grief doesn't respect schedules. It seeped through the cracks, into the kettle whistle, into the hum of the refrigerator, into the mirror that watched me pretend. The apartment became a museum of almosts. Every object carried residue, his mug, her perfume, the dent in the pillow that still shaped itself to him. I began cleaning like it was prayer. Each swipe of a cloth, each bag of trash felt like negotiation. If I could erase their fingerprints, maybe the memories would follow. But betrayal leaves fingerprints on air. By midnight I was surrounded by plastic bags and half-empty shelves. The room looked purged, but inside me the mess only grew louder. Then a glass slipped from my hand. It shattered on the tile, clean, decisive. Something inside me followed. I stared at the shards glittering on the floor, and the strangest calm settled over me. Breaking felt honest. So I broke more. A bowl. A plate. The sound filled the apartment like applause for an ending no one else would witness. When it was over, I sank to the floor among the ruins and sobbed until my throat turned raw. Not the cinematic kind of crying, no beauty, no rhythm, just the body emptying itself of salt and noise. Between the sobs I kept repeating the words that started everything. They laughed. They laughed. Each repetition dulled the edge until the words became pure sound, no meaning, just motion. Eventually, exhaustion did what mercy could not. I slept there on the cold tile, surrounded by broken glass that glimmered faintly in the streetlight like constellations drawn too close. Morning didn't feel like rescue. It felt like aftermath. The apartment smelled of dust and defeat. My body ached as if grief were a sport I had trained for too long. I made coffee with shaking hands, drank it standing up, and told myself I would not cry today. Promises to yourself are strange things. They sound brave and break quietly. When I looked in the mirror, I saw the first evidence of transformation, not the glamorous kind, but the small erosion that begins before rebuilding.
Eyes swollen.
Lips pale. But there was something steadier in the way I met my own gaze.
Like a storm eye forming.
Betrayal had rewritten my reflection. I was no longer the woman waiting to be chosen. I was the woman learning how to remain. Days blurred into one long rehearsal of pretending. Work. Eat. Sleep. Repeat. Each motion a placeholder for healing I hadn't yet earned. At work, people noticed. You okay?
You look tired.
I smiled. Just tired. That phrase became my camouflage. In truth, I wasn't tired.
You was sentide.
There's a difference. Emails multiplied, deadlines marched on. I completed tasks perfectly, almost obsessively, because control is addictive when everything else has slipped. If I could not fix love, at least I could balance columns and answer every message within 3 minutes. But every evening when the building dimmed, the ache returned, quietly, like a stray dog that knows where you hide your scraps of attention.
Ideewo kom tro the sam streetswear, on sweket together.
Same cafe. Same bookstore. The city had become a replica, familiar, but stripped of belonging.
At night, I scrolled through the digital graveyard of our conversation.
Each good morning, now read like irony. Each I miss you like theft.
I whispered into the dark.
Were you laughing when you wrote this too? The question hung in the air unanswered, because answers are luxuries the betrayed must buy with more pain. I closed my phone, turned off the light, and listened to my heartbeat hammer against the pillowcase. Still here.
Still fighting for space inside my own body.
One evening, after another day of automatic survival, I found myself sitting on the floor again, but this time, not surrounded by glass. Surrounded by quiet. There's a point where sadness burns itself out and leaves behind something cleaner, like ashes ready for soil. I realized I hadn't checked their social pages in days. The curiosity that once devoured me had gone still. I opened my notebook and wrote. Healing doesn't ask permission. It starts when the exhaustion becomes louder than the memory. I underlined it twice. A week later, I saw them. Not planned.
Note dramatique.
Just a coincidence orchestrated by a city too small for old ghosts. They were at a cafe terrace, sunlight warming their faces. He looked older. She looked relieved. Together, they looked like a photograph taken too soon after an argument, smiling because someone said say cheese.
For aert bitifrose.
Then I breathed. And then I simply watched.
No shaking. No dizziness.
Just the quiet realization that their story no longer included my name. And that was fine. I turned away. The city didn't tilt. The sky didn't fall. I bought myself a pastry I didn't even want, just to prove I could hold sweetness again. That night, I lit a candle. Not for them. For me. The flame trembled but didn't falter.
I whispered into the light.
You made me bleed, but you didn't kill me. The room stayed still, as if listening. I sat there for a long time, tracing patterns on the table, feeling the first small pulse of peace returning, not loud, not triumphant, just honest. Betrayal had taken everything I thought defined me, love, trust, certainty. But in its vacuum, I found something purer, awareness. I learned that loneliness isn't the absence of people, it's the absence of truth.
And on struss move in, loneliness move out quietly, leaving only space.
I began to fill that space with small human things.
Morning walks.
Real food. Books with happy endings I used to mock.
Slowly, the air changed de texture.
The silence that once suffocated me began to sound like safety. The laughter that haunted me faded into memory, no longer threat, just echo. And somewhere between one breath and the next, I realized I had stopped asking why. The question had run out of fuel. There was no closure waiting in their apology, there was only closure waiting in my acceptance. People think breakdowns are collapses, I whisper. But they're really breakthroughs wearing grief's clothing. I didn't lose my mind. I let go of the story that was killing it. I exhale.
The candle flicker on and steady. Tomorrow, you'll wake up and keep going.
Not as the betrayed woman, but as the one who survived the breaking. And maybe, just maybe, that's enough for now.
Tomorrow calm.
And it was quiet.
No thunder. No grand signe from the universe.
Just a calm morning, washed clean by the rain that had finally fallen overnight. The streets shimmered under the pale light, like the city itself had been rinsed of gossip.
I woke before the alarm.
My first thought wasn't of them. It was of coffee. A small, ridiculous victory, but mine. I showered slowly, letting the steam wrap around me until the mirror blurred. When I wiped it clean, the reflection staring back didn't look haunted anymore.
Still red, yes.
But solid. The kind of tired that comes after surviving a storm, not before it. I got dressed with intention, a black dress, simple and sharp, no jewelry. Hair tied back.
No armor, no disguise.
I wanted to be seen as I was, unguarded but unbroken. As I buttoned my coat, I realized I didn't feel angry anymore. Anger had burned itself out and left something colder, clarity. At noon, I sat at my desk and typed 2 messages. One to him. One to her. No explanations. Just 3 p.m. Cafe across from the bookstore.
Come.
I didn't add please or we need to talk. This wasn't a request. It was a closing ceremony. When I hit send, my hands didn't shake. The hours leading to 3 passed in slow motion. Every tick of the clock sounded deliberate, like the universe keeping count. I packed my bag carefully, notebook, pen, phone.
No singles. No mementos.
No defenses.
At 2h45, he left.
The air was crisp, the kind that makes colors sharper.
He walked without music, without hurry.
The city around me pulsed with normal life, people arguing, laughing, rushing. It felt good to know the world didn't revolve around my heartbreak anymore. The cafe door chimed when I pushed it open.
Warmer.
The scent of oranges and espresso. A soundscape of clinking cups and soft jazz that tried to mean comfort. I chose a table by the window, the same table from before. Funny how places hold memories even when we pretend they don't. I ordered tea. Green, unsweetened. Something about the bitterness felt appropriate. And then I waited. Not anxiously. Not hopefully.
Just présent.
He arrived first. Always early, that was his thing. The illusion of responsibility. He spotted me instantly. His eyes flickered, surprise, then hesitation, then the smile. That same, practiced, diplomatic smile. He walked over, hands in pockets, pretending casual. Hey, he said.
You look good.
I am, I said.
Sit.
He did. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was surgical. I wasn't sure you'd want to see me. You knew I would, I said. He nodded, guilty and grateful at once. I've thought about what I'd say if.
D'entrehers, y interrupted.
Just be honest. He exhaled, shoulders dropping. I didn't mean to hurt you. I smiled, not kindly. Intent doesn't erase impact. He looked down. I know. The door chimed. Her perfume arrived before she did.
Samson, jasmine and lightning.
She saw us and froze for a moment, then rearranged herself into poise. Always the performer. She approached, heels sharp against the tile. Hi, she said, soft and bright.
You look beautiful.
Thank you, I said.
Sit.
She sat. And there we were, the triangle restored, but rearranged. This time, I was the calmest person at the table. The waitress came, took our orders. 3 cups.
No one drank. He let them squirm first.
There's power in silence. It forces liars to fill the void with their own discomfort. Finally, he spoke. I guess we should talk about everything. I nodded.
Start where Vertrous besoin for you.
He looked at her, then back at me. It wasn't supposed to happen. But it did, I said. We didn't plan. You planned enough to hide it. His throat moved. Words failed him. She tried next. You were distant, she said. We didn't know how to tell you.
He looked, quiet, sharp.
You knew exactly how to tell me. You just preferred laughter. She flinched. That's not fair. Fair? I repeated. You laughed while I was asking what was wrong. You looked me in the eye and told me nothing had changed. You smiled while stealing what wasn't yours.
And now you want fair?
Her mouth tightened, but she didn't answer. He leaned forward. We were confused. We didn't mean. You weren't confused, I said.
You were careful.
That stopped him. I took a sip of tea, now cold. It tasted right that way. Then I reached into my bag and set 3 objects on the table. 1. His spare key. 2. Her bracelet. 3. A small envelope containing 2 photographs. Their eyes followed the movement, like guilty children waiting for punishment. This, I said, is everything you left inside my life. He stared at the key, his name etched on the tag I'd made once for fun. She stared at the bracelet, twisting her wrist like something was missing. I don't need these anymore, I said.
They belong to people you were when you lead.
He opened his mouth. Closed it. I wish we could undo it, he murmured. You can't, I said. But you can watch me survive it. She leaned forward. You're enjoying this, aren't you? That one almost made me laugh. No, I said. Enjoyment was your department. I'm just reclaiming the volume of my silence. For a long time, no one spoke. The cafe around us hummed with life, forks against plates, steam hissing, conversations rising and falling.
We were trigostsonting the same table.
Finally, I broke the quiet. Do you know the worst part? They looked up. It wasn't the betrayal. It wasn't even the lies. It was how easy it was for you to keep going. How easily you slept, laughed, ate, while I forgot how to breathe. Her eyes filled.
Mes guilt, mes performances.
It didn't matter. You both taught me something, I continued. That people will love you as deeply as they can use you. And when you stop being useful, they'll call it distance. Neither of them argued. Even liars know when truth has better rhythm. I gathered my things, but before standing, I said one last thing. Calm. Clear.
Final. I forgive myself.
He frowned, confused. For what?
For believing you.
For staying after the first lie. For thinking love was about endurance. She looked at me like she wanted to speak, but her courage arrived late. I continued, soft but certain. You don't owe me guilt, and I don't owe you hatred. We're done. That's the only justice that matters. I left the key, the bracelet, the envelope. A small altar of closure. Then I stood, and both of them instinctively rose, as if muscle memory still mistook me for gravity. I smiled, not cruelly, just truthfully. You can sit, I said. I'm already gone. And I walked away. Outside, the air was cool.
A little wind tugged at my coat.
The city moved, not caring, not cruel, just alive. I stood for a moment at the crosswalk, eyes closed, breathing. Inhale. Exhale. Steady. My heartbeat answered.
Note frantique.
Not broken. Just mine. Across the street, the bookstore window displayed a small handwritten sign. Used, not used up. I smiled. Perfect. I kept walking. Each step lighter. Each breath quieter. There was no soundtrack, no applause.
Just the subtle rhythm of a woman living the wreckage of Someone else's story.
When I reached home, the apartment didn't feel haunted anymore. It felt spacious. Clean. The silence was no longer punishment. It was proof.
Il y a candle. Ça me sent à always. Sans loud.
Smoke. It no longer reminded me of them. It reminded me of the night I decided to stay alive. I sat at my desk, opened my notebook, and wrote. Today I ended a story without needing to destroy its authors. That's how you know you've healed, when closure doesn't look like revenge.
The flamme flickered, steady and bright.
Outside someone laughed, not them, not cruelly, just a stranger's easy joy drifting through the open window. For the first time, I didn't flinch. It was just laughter again. Just sound.
They lead to me together.
They laughed about it. And maybe they still do. But when they look at me now, if they ever do, they won't see the girl who begged to be believed. They'll see the woman who stopped needing their truth. I thought confrontation meant fighting. But sometimes, it just means leaving quietly, and letting the silence finish the sentence. The silence did finish it. That night, after I walked away from them, the quiet followed me home like a companion, not heavy anymore, not hostile. Just there.
Like a witness.
Like peace finally had a body. When I opened my door, the apartment smelled faintly of wax and the last breath of the candle I'd left burning earlier. For a second I froze, expecting the ache to return, that reflex of pain rushing in when comfort tries to enter. But nothing came.
Just stillness. And the realization that I could stand in my own space without flinching.
I took off my shoes, dropped my keys, and walked barefoot through the apartment. Each step felt like a new claim. The floorboards creaked differently now, not in protest, but in recognition. As if the place understood I was home, finally, as myself. I sat on the couch and exhaled. It was such a small thing, a breath, but it sounded like freedom. That night, I didn't cry. Not because I was numb, but because there was nothing left to mourn. I had already buried the version of me that begged to be understood. And the woman who rose from that grave didn't need permission anymore.
When he slept, he dreamed in color again.
Not of them, not of loss, just images.
A coastline. A dog running along wet sand. A pair off en catching rein. Dream with no plot, no moral.
Just life, unedited.
When morning came, he woke to sunlight cutting through the curtain like gold dust.
It painted my room in warmth, gentle, not intrusive. For once, the light didn't hurt. I made coffee, stood by the open window, and watched the city move, the way pigeons fluttered onto rooftops, the way a child laughed from somewhere below.
Life was happening again.
And I was in it. Betrayal had ended something, yes. But endings, I realized, don't destroy you. They just strip you down until only truth remains. And truth, when you stop fighting it, is strangely tender. Weeks passed, quietly. I went to work. I answered messages. I learned to live without expecting the past to text me back. Sometimes I caught glimpses of them, online, in passing. Smiling, posting, performing their happiness for digital applause.
Used to feel something sharp when he saw those pictures.
Now, it was just observation. They existed, as people do. And I didn't belong to their story anymore. That knowledge didn't hurt. It freed me. One Sunday afternoon, I cleaned out my drawers.
Not in grief, in renoual.
Old letters, ticket stubs, notes, receipts from dinners that once meant something. I didn't burn them. I didn't throw them away dramatically. I folded them neatly, placed them in a small box, and labeled it, was. Then I slid it into the back of my closet. Out of sight, but not erased. I didn't want to pretend those years didn't happen. They did. They just weren't forever. Healing, I learned, isn't deleting the past.
It's understanding you don't live there anymore.
The following week, a friend asked me to join her for dinner, the first real invitation I'd accepted in months. We sat at an outdoor table under string lights, the kind that make everyone look softer. She talked about her new job, her mistakes, her dreams, and for the first time, I didn't compare her happiness to my own. I listened, laughed, and when she reached for my hand across the table, I realized how long it had been since I'd allowed someone to touch me without fear. There was no rush, no romantic pretense, just presence. It reminded me that connection doesn't always come with conditions. Sometimes, it's just two people being human at the same table.
When he walked home, the city lights blurred behind me. The wind was warm.
And for the first time since everything fell apart, I didn't feel like I was walking away from something. I was walking toward something, even if I didn't know what yet. At home, I opened my journal. The same one that began with heartbreak now waited for a different kind of entry. I flipped past the pages filled with pain, past the ones that still smelled faintly of tears dried into the paper. And I wrote, "Peace isn't loud. It doesn't arrive like a rescue. It sneaks in quietly, sits beside you, and waits for you to notice." I smiled when I finished the line. Then I closed the book and let the silence fill the room again, not as punishment, but as prayer. A month later, I walked past the cafe. That cafe. The one where I ended it. It was different now, new furniture, new paint, new people. Even the menu had changed. The ghosts were gone. It wasn't their place anymore. It wasn't mine either. Just a cafe.
Just a place where strangers drink coffee.
And somehow, that felt perfect. I stopped at the bookstore across the street. On the display table by the window was a small sign.
Every ending begin again.
It made me laugh, softly, genuinely.
He booked a notebook, blank and white, entitled,
"A New Space. No rules. No scars." When I got home, I didn't write right away. I just placed it on my desk and let it sit there like a promise I didn't have to rush. That night, I stood by the open window again. The city was humming below, soft and endless. I thought about how much energy I'd wasted trying to understand people who didn't deserve to be mysteries. How much time I'd spent begging silence to speak when it had already said enough. And in that thought, I found forgiveness, not for them, but for myself.
He whispered into the night.
"You did your best." The wind carried the words somewhere I didn't need to follow. There's something holy about ordinary life after chaos. The way mornings come unannounced but consistent. The way laughter returns uninvited but welcome. The way pain stops being a visitor and becomes just a story you tell carefully, like a fable you once believed in. I still think of them sometimes, not with hate, not with longing. Just as facts. Two names in a history book I no longer need to study. Their laughter used to haunt me.
Now, I kan barely remember the sound. Time doesn't et all everything.
It just teaches you which wounds to stop touching. A few nights ago, I met someone new.
Not allové, not yet, maybe never.
Just someone who listened without trying to fix me. Someone who looked at me without seeing a wound to fill. It reminded me that love, the real kind, doesn't arrive to replace pain. It arrives when pain has finished teaching. We talked for hours about nothing and everything, music, childhood fears, the comfort of small things. And somewhere between sentences, I realized I wasn't afraid anymore. Not of being lied to.
Not of being alone.
Not even of being happy again. Because happiness, I finally understood, isn't something someone gives you.
It's something you stop doing yourself.
When I got home that night, I stood in front of the mirror.
The woman staring back looked different. Not pretty, not too gay, just real.
Her scars weren't visible, but they shaped her posture. She stood taller, lighter. As if the past had melted off her shoulders and pooled harmlessly at her feet. I whispered to her, softly, honestly, "You made it." And she smiled. This isn't a story about betrayal anymore. It's a story about reclamation. About what happens when you walk through fire and stop smelling of smoke.
They lead to me together.
They laughed about it. But the echo faded. And I stayed. The world kept moving, and so did I. The laughter stopped hurting. The silence became sacred. And my heart, battered, bruised, stubborn, learned how to beat for me again. I used to think healing meant forgetting. Now I know it means remembering differently. So if you're listening to this, whoever you are, wherever you are,
know this, you will survive the breaking too.
And one day, you'll look at the ruins. And you'll see they were never ruins at all.
They lead to me together.
They laughed about it. But I lived through it alone. And somehow, that's enough.